Hi, I'm Jim Zogby, and welcome to Viewpoint. As the primary season continues with two viable Democratic candidates who have some distinct differences, they're still very much in the race for the nomination, and there's a lot of talk about party unity, or in some cases, disunity. We're going to take a look at some of the social and political conditions that have created this rift on the left. Joining me for the discussion is Bill Press, host of nationally syndicated radio program, a CNN political analyst, and author of a new book, Buyer's Remorse: How Obama Let Progressives Down. Thanks for joining us.
It's great to be here again, Jim. Good to see you.
You know, I've done shows on Trumpism, the phenomenon of Donald Trump, where it came from, and what were the factors that fed it. We've not done the same on the left to see what this phenomenon that Bernie Sanders is leading is all about. And yet, despite the fact that they say he ought to get out, it continues. And he has clearly about a half of the electorate that is supporting him. And I want to explore what it means and see if we can pull apart some of these factors. And I want to take them, if we could, and ask you to weigh them, as a pollster might do, in terms of importance. The first is...
Do you know a good pollster?
How much of it is anger at establishment versus attraction to the issues that Bernie raises? How would you weigh the two of them in the balance on this?
First of all, I think it's both,
okay,
right? I certainly felt the burn early on. The reason I do is because Bernie's to me, Bernie's the real thing, right? He's been there on the issues forever. I mean, you don't have to convince him to oppose the TPP or the Keystone Pipeline, or to be for $15 for the minimum wage, or to be for single-payer health care. Like, he's always been there. So he is authentic. So that's part of it. But I think the other side of it, as you say, I'm not sure I would use the word anger, although it fits. I think of it as more frustration. And
when I saw Nevada play out, people were angry.
They were angry in Nevada. I think they were angry at that particular chair and the way she ran that meeting, and the fact that it was really dictatorial in that hall, without condoning what happened there. But so it's interesting that you mentioned with Trumpism, because I think Trumpism and Sandersism, if you will, or Bernieism, kind of they have the same source, maybe, which is something that the political establishment, the business establishment, the media establishment all missed, and I include myself as part of it. The depth of frustration and maybe anger at millions and millions of Americans, the majority of Americans, I think, they feel they've just been left out, and all the wealth has been going to the top, as Bernie talks about, and all the advantages and the opportunities have been going to the top, and most Americans are out there really struggling just to make ends meet, and they feel that the political establishment, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, doesn't give a damn about them. And they were looking for somebody to come along and say, I know that guy's going to fight for me. Now, the Trump side of it is purely phony. You don't have the billionaire in his own jet roll up with Trump on the side of the jet and trust him to fight for you. But Bernie is for real. So I think that's one. I would say that's, if you had to look a percentage, maybe at least 60% of it. Okay. And then the 40% is people do believe in Bernie's issues and in the big ideas. And you know, here's what frustrates me so much this year, is everybody says, oh, the math. Every time I'm on television, they're always talking about the math. You know, for me, politics, from the day I got involved with Eugene McCarthy for president in 1968, politics has been about passion, it's about excitement, it's about ideas, it's about, you know, hope and change, to use a phrase, right? And Bernie embodies that, and he really enables people to think big. So that's at least the other 40 or 30%.
I call the authenticity issue the meta issue that sort of undergirds, it's sort of behind everything. I remember when Tim Kaine won, and Howard Dean came into the Democratic Party and said one day, Tim Kaine taught us a lesson. It's about religion. He talked about his religion. We have to start talking about our religion. And he did. And I went to him and I said, when you talk about religion, it's inauthentic. When he talks about religion, it's real. People voted for Tim Kaine because he's a real person. And I think that to some degree, Bernie does reflect that. It's a question of, this is not a sort of powder puff. He's not like made up for television, clearly not made up for television, and not manufactured by polls. People see something real and it resonates. As Melrose would say, the bell rings clear and true.
Yeah. It is uncanny. I mean, I've known Bernie a little bit before he announced. And the first time we were sitting in his office and we talked about it, he was thinking about running for president. And I'm just sitting there thinking, are you kidding me? I mean, he was the most unlikely presidential candidate. 74 years old, his hair now, he keeps it a little more trimmed, but you know how wild it always was. And he's not your glad hander, he's not your backslapper. I mean, we were together in Minneapolis at the DNC meeting last summer, and we had dinner the night before. We walked from the hotel to a steakhouse a block away. It took us an hour to get there because everybody wanted to have their photo taken with this rock star, and I couldn't believe it. And Bernie, he was doing it, right? And people say, can I have a photo? He'd say, oh yeah, sure. But he would just sort of, whereas Bill Clinton would have been hugging them and talking about their mother and their pets and kind of whatever. But people see that. He is for real. There's no phoniness at all.
On the issues, what I found intriguing was when he first started running, the issue was a socialist isn't going anywhere. And I was looking back to 1988 when Michael Dukakis would not call himself a liberal. It was a bad word. That's not even an issue anymore. It's not talked about.
It's amazing to me that nobody, now if Bernie becomes a nominee, I'm sure the Republicans will try to use that. They'll call him a communist, a socialist and everything. But I don't think it will work then. But right now in this primary season, nobody talks about that. And I think the reason is because Bernie has, for two reasons. One is they've called Barack Obama a socialist for so long that the word has kind of lost its sting, I think. And two, I think Bernie has let people know this is what it means to be a democratic socialist. It means for being health care for every American. It means for free college tuition for every American kid. It means a living wage, right? It means no more wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I mean, he's defined it, and I think people see, hey, I don't care what you call it, I'm with that.
Dick Van Dyke was on in Nevada back then when the Nevada caucuses were taking place, and he said, I've waited my entire life for a New Deal Democrat in the mold of Franklin Roosevelt to come forward. And I thought, that's an interesting way of capturing it. There is, this gets me to a point. I mean, you and I are clearly not millennials. Dick Van Dyke is definitely not a millennial.
Right.
And yet the real appeal is with millennials. He's winning that constituency 3-1. Just as on the issue of authenticity and who speaks the truth, he wins 3-1. What does this mean? I mean, I watch these pictures of this grumpy old white guy with kids screaming and yelling, and as you say, rushing up and wanting photos taken. Where does that come from?
Well, I think a couple of things. Number one, again, he's the real deal, which in a world of phonies, right, to see someone who is authentic, to use that word again, I think it excites people. They find it so different and attractive, right, and young people in particular. And two, I mean, the issues that he's talking about, he speaks to their aspirations. And, you know, somebody said, Bernie says hope, and Hillary says nope, right? Bernie says we can have, you know, a $15 minimum wage for everybody, and Hillary says, no, you know, you got to be realistic here, like 12 is all you can do. Bernie says we can have, every kid in America knows that they're going to get a free college education at a public university or college. And Hillary says, oh, you got to count the pennies, you know, you can't dream that high, you can't dream that big. Even Joe Biden said, what's the Democratic Party all about? What's America all about? Is thinking big. And I think that really appeals to particularly to young people. Maybe a little foolishly or naively that we all have those big dreams, but the last thing we want and I can remember, you can too, as an 18, 19, 20-year-old is for your parents to say, oh, no, don't think you can achieve that. you can only go so high.
If we're looking at it as a phenomenon.
So Hillary's a downer for these kids. She says, let's be pragmatic. And Bernie says, let's think big.
If we're looking at it as a phenomenon and compare it to Obama 2008, similarities and differences.
Well, Barack Obama did touch the young people and brought them out the way I hadn't seen anybody since Eugene McCarthy, and I was one of the young kids for Eugene McCarthy. He is certainly not the progressive or the democratic socialist or as liberal as Bernie Sanders is. But I think he did inspire that kind of hope and change is what he was all about. And sort of it was the same thing. With all Hillary's pitch then and now was, I'm the one with the experience, right? I'm the one who's sort of going to govern from the center and kind of keep things under control. And Barack Obama represented profound change, particularly being the first African-American president. And Bernie represents change, not so much because of his age, but just again because of the issues he talks about and who he is.
Now, you wrote the book on progressives feeling let down. Is Bernie a recapturing of that dream that progressives had that Obama, they felt, might fulfill? Is it a different dream? Is there a danger of letting it down again and creating a very different dynamic in the country?
There's always a danger of being let down again. That sort of goes with the territory. But I'm proud of the fact.
It's Charlie Brown in the football.
It is. But I'm proud of the fact that Bernie wrote a blurb for my book. And one of his criticisms of Obama, which I reflect in the book, and then he puts it on the cover of the book, is that President Obama didn't follow through with rallying the American people and the people who elected him to office in getting his agenda done. And that's a mistake that Bernie will never make. Now, he will either make it as a nominee of the party or he will make it as the head of the political revolution and the movement that he really is trying to build. And I think that's important to recognize, and I keep reminding people all the time. You keep thinking of Bernie as a candidate for president, and if he doesn't win the nomination, then he's just going to go, back to Vermont and take care of his garden or something. No, no, no. Bernie, when he talks about a movement and a revolution, he means it, and it's real. I mean, he means changing the priorities of the Democratic Party. He means backing candidates, progressive candidates for the Congress, and getting a Congress and a Senate that will work with a progressive president and get his ideas accomplished.
To what extent does Bernie's base overlap with Trump's base? We saw in West Virginia white working class miners, unemployed miners, folks who one would have expected to be a Trump constituency, giving Bernie a big boost in the state and in several other states as well. What's that about, and what's that? I mean, we got millennials on the one side. You have the faded, jaded peace activists of the 60s, our crowd. And then you got this other group here that I think is non-ideological. They're not sort of inspired by the authenticity, as young people are. They're not sort of captured by the issues that they see being resuscitated after a 30-year hiatus.
Right, no.
But they're needy nevertheless, and they're finding something in Bernie and in Trump that speaks to something. What is that something that resonates there?
This is, you're right, Bernie's got the real old-fashioned lefties, he's got the millennials, and you've got
just old lefties, just be clear. Okay.
White working-class Americans who really do feel let down and have been. Their wages haven't gone up for the last 20 years or so. They're working longer hours, they're taking home less money at the end of the month. And Bernie and Trump both do appeal to them. And Jim, I think this is one of the maybe scariest parts of this whole campaign for me, is that, I'll give you a quick story. I'm out in Chicago, I met with some labor leaders, and their international union endorsed Hillary Clinton. The local in Chicago endorsed Bernie Sanders. And these guys all had Bernie stickers on their cars. And they said what worries them is when they go around the factory floor, their workers tell them, we're with Bernie. But if it's not Bernie, we're with Trump. I know one of the major unions, biggest unions here. I had lunch with their president last week, who told me they took a poll of their members. They refused to release, they decided they would not release the poll because the poll showed such a high percentage of their members would vote for Donald Trump if it's not Bernie Sanders. So there is an appeal, which, now there's a lot of education there to say, here's why Bernie will deliver and Trump would never, and you can't trust Trump. He's basically anti-union, but it's a scary thought.
Some numbers I want to put up here about some charts about income, the income issue that Bernie raises a lot of. The first is the issue of income inequality that he talks about, which I think is really quite significant. This is the top 1%, which obviously you can see has the absolute bulk of where wealth and income goes. With the middle, the top 1% here, the top 5 and 10% next. Almost all wealth going to 0.1% of the population. And that produces a situation which, when you compare the U.S. internationally with where our middle class stands, it's really quite frightening. From Spain all the way down. With Spain, the middle class earns 55% of the wealth in the country. The U.S. is the lowest after Switzerland, Sweden, and even India.
Right.
Our middle class earns less than 20% of the overall wealth of the country. As we would say quite indelicately, that's enough to piss off the good humor man. and that's what you're seeing play out.
Yes, absolutely. And again, Bernie's been talking about this for 30, 40 years, right? This has been going on. This didn't just happen overnight.
I mean, look, Mexico, 40%.
Yeah, Mexico, right? This has been going on, and the people who've been at the short end of the stick for so long finally have had enough. They are pissed off to the point where they're willing to support somebody, maybe even if they don't think he can win, they're going to support him because he's there, he's on their side. I mean, Barack Obama called income inequality the defining issue of our generation. But what has he done about it? I don't mean to be, you know, anti-Obama, but it's gotten, the income gap has gotten bigger under his presidency, not smaller. So now you've got Bernie and you've got Elizabeth Warren, who's on this issue. And by the way, again, back to the first conversation I had with Bernie, he knew and I knew and you knew Hillary Clinton would never have talked about it.
That's the next question I
want
to get out is,
never.
To what degree, if we're looking at anger or alienation or frustration at the inequality of wealth, if we're looking at lack of authenticity, how much is Bernie support and how much of it is Hillary Clinton? If Bernie had run against somebody else, would we be in the same situation?
Well,
if Joe Biden had gotten in the race, for example, would the oxygen available for a Bernie have been less?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely. And you know,
so it was as if Hillary Clinton represented all of the things from inauthenticity to establishment to not paying attention to these issues of income inequality and the big dreams that people wanted to have. Is that what?
Yeah, and not to be too critical of Hillary, I supported her over Barack Obama in 2008 because I thought she was the most experienced one. I got to know her well as First Lady when I was Democratic Chair of California. You know, she's a good person. I'll support her if she's a nominee. But look at her. She's part of that 0.1. But you look at getting $350,000 for speech to Goldman Sachs. I mean, that's more money than most of these people make in 10 years, right? And you look at, she's in the Hamptons for the summer, right? Lives in Chappaqua. She gets an $8 million book advance. She is part of that 0. And I think people see that she's not for real. It doesn't ring true. Look at her super PAC, right? That's the other reflection, I think, of Bernie's authenticity, we keep using that word, is the fact that he's raised over $200 million from small donations, average $27, as he points out every rally. So I think that all ties together. He gets it. He knows, I think, steps toward bringing that gap down higher taxes on those
One
wealthy people.
issue that Bernie
And it's for
keeps
real.
raising is the electability one.
Yeah.
I want to put up some poll numbers to take a look at that because it's interesting, and I think it tells a story. These are from Real Clear Politics, and
Yes.
I think that the numbers are worth noting. This is Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump.
Yep.
And she beats him barely.
The average is about 2 points, right?
It's
Yeah.
about 2 points. And across the board, Trump leading in 3 of the polls, which is itself quite shocking.
Totally.
That a Democrat is losing to Donald Trump. Now let's look at the Bernie numbers. With Bernie,
can I say something about the Hillary
Yeah.
numbers before you move? Which is,
Yeah.
you know, what we're hearing from.
let's go back and put the
All right.
Hillary numbers
Oh,
up.
Okay.
Yeah,
What we're hearing from the from the Clinton camp right now.
full screen if we could. Yeah,
What we're hearing from the Clinton camp is that this is Bernie's fault.
yeah.
You know, they're blaming Bernie for the fact that she's not doing better. The Clinton campaign had better start realizing there's a weakness in that candidate in the terms of appeal to certain constituencies, the ones we've talked about, and they can't blame it on Bernie. It's like when the Mets lose to the Nats, right? The Mets would say, hey, we would have won if the Nats hadn't hit so many home runs.
Yeah.
No. It's the Mets who've screwed up. She hasn't connected.
Let's go to the Bernie ones again on the full screen and let's look at them because I think that they also tell an interesting story. The numbers are wildly different with a huge Sanders lead. And again, the issue here, as framed by the others in the party, is that he's leading because he's not been attacked. And
That's what they say.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you know what? There's a certain truth to that. I mean, he has not had 25 years of attacks the way Hillary Clinton has had. But I think what this shows is there is a real yearning for an outsider, somebody who is, people have had it with the political establishment, the media establishment across the board. They really feel that the official Washington and beyond does not care about them. They know these two guys, they believe he does, they know he does, and they, you know, they're willing to, I guess, take a ride on him, which I think raises an interesting issue, which is, so the Republicans believe, we never thought would happen, have gone, the people, not the establishment, have gone with the outsider. Now, it looks like the Democratic Party is going to put up the ultimate insider versus the ultimate outsider. I think that's a real roll of the dice, and I do think Bernie Sanders would be a stronger candidate against Donald Trump.
let's look at the favorable, unfavorable, because that also tells
Plus,
an
you don't have
interesting
the
story.
baggage with
That
Bernie
is,
Sanders.
and here's what we're seeing when we put it up and look at it again with the rather shocking that you've got two folks running for president with almost 6 in 10 finding them unfavorable. Bernie's numbers are better, and this issue of the significant unfavorables of both lead me to dread a really ugly contest that will probably have more voter suppression in terms of why am I going to vote for either one? I'm just not voting at all. And it may open the door to a third-party candidate that we're not interested in.
Yeah,
seeing come on board.
it may, but you're right. You've got basically 6 out of 10 don't like either Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, which, like you, I think this portends an ugly campaign. The basis of both campaigns is going to be, you may not like me, but look how bad this guy is. You got to really hate this other person. Trump is already doing that about Hillary, and Hillary's doing that about Donald Trump. And here's Bernie, who's the most liked of all, and people are saying, well, he can't win because the math kind of is against him. So I think, look, it's already an ugly campaign. It's just going to get uglier. This led Bernie to say, once again, maybe it was not the most felicitous phrase, but once again, we may be a force between the lesser of two evils. Obviously, Hillary's not evil, but that's just a phrase for saying you don't vote for somebody that you're really excited about, you're voting against the other person.
So
we've had too many of those kind of elections.
What this leads us to is the question of, do the votes convey? If Hillary is the nominee, do the Sanders people support her? And we have some numbers on that, which I think are again, useful to pay attention to, with 33% of Sanders supporters saying that they won't. 15% of Republican voters not voting for Trump. That's a concern, I think, that folks ought to have. Is there a way for Secretary Clinton, if she is the nominee, to win that 33% over, or do you think the deal is closed on that?
Well, I think there is. I've also, remember, she talks about 40% of her supporters in 2008 said they would not vote for Barack Obama. And she went out there and she really did actively and aggressively campaign for Obama. I believe that if she's a nominee, Bernie Sanders will do the same. I've seen numbers where maybe 80% of millennials say they don't like Donald Trump. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to vote for Hillary, but it certainly means they're not going to go for him. So I think Bernie can. I think Bernie himself will be key in their seeing the importance of voting in order to block Donald Trump, and also that again I think is part of the movement. And so he can say to this, and he's got the best list, the greatest number of people, the resources for building a movement that nobody else has had, not even Barack Obama with all of his people. He can do it. And I think he will say, our first job in this movement is blocking Donald Trump. Our second job is throwing a lot of the dead wood out of this Congress and electing a new progressive Congress.
One last issue that comes up here that I think is kind of a mistake I think that Bernie's made. His peak, if you will, at the Democratic Party and the chair, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, over the debate schedule, which was stacked against anybody challenging Secretary Clinton, 4 debates on weekends that no one was going to watch, and timed with either Super Bowl or World Series or whatever. No, and then the Victory Fund, which has become, I think, a major irritant, on releasing that money, which allows, instead of people giving $2,700, they can raise $350,000 for the Victory Fund, which Secretary Clinton is now using to fund her campaign.
Right.
And then the committee appointments, the 75 initial standing committee appointments, Bernie got 3 and felt he was unfairly treated. There's now calls even among senators. There was a story in the Hill today about Democratic senators saying she's got to go. I'm not sure it was a good idea for the candidate for the presidency to pick a fight with the chair. I think he was fighting beneath his weight on that one. I mean, I don't think he should have picked a fight down. But nevertheless, he has, and like I said, senators are concerned this is a divisive situation. What about Debbie Wasserman Schultz's future? Is she a divisive figure, and is it a problem for whoever the nominee is?
Well, let me put it this way. I mean, in a sense, I don't have a dog in this fight. You know, I'm a friend of Debbie's and known her for a long time. But
and I've served with her for 3 years now in the party.
And I think the reality is, as Bernie points out, the Democratic Party establishment is with Hillary Clinton and has been since before she announced as a candidate. That's why she's got over 500 super delegates. That's why 4 members of the president's cabinet have endorsed her. And in effect, the president has made it clear that he'd prefer Hillary. Clearly, the DNC and the whole apparatus, I believe, you cannot deny, have tilted toward Hillary Clinton. What I find amusing about, if I were advising Bernie, I probably would have said, you know, don't pick a fight with Debbie. I mean, just, it'll happen. But right now, the word for the movement, if you will, to get her out as chair before the convention is not coming from Bernie Sanders. It's coming from Clinton supporters in the U.S. Senate. Claire McCaskill has said that when asked, do you support Debbie Wasserman Schultz staying there, she said, it's up to the chairwoman to make that decision herself as to whether or not she can serve. That's not a ringing endorsement from the first senator to endorse Hillary Clinton. So I think they see that we've got to get her out of the way because they're afraid she'd be such a divisive figure at the convention that it would be impossible to have a display of unity.
Listen, we're out of time, but I really thank you for this. And it's a phenomenon that we've really got to explore more because this is going to be with us now not just through this election, but for the next several years. I think there's a progressive movement born again in American politics.
The burn is with us. Yeah. It's going to stay.
Thank you so much for joining us. For more information, you can follow us on Twitter at AAIUSA or check out the website at aaiusa.org. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week on Viewpoint. Thanks, Bill.
Thank you, Jim.